Welcome back, listeners. As usual, it's been a very eventful week with a lot of happenings at OpenAI, the ouster of Sam Altman, and then, of course, the reinstatement of Altman back as CEO of OpenAI. Of course, OpenAI, we all know, is a household name because it garnered 100 million users in just the first 2 weeks of its launch in November 2022. All that seems to be history with the kind of goings on at OpenAI, and we yet have to see how OpenAI will rebuild, or rather, how Sam Altman will rebuild the organization. But for today, I would like to welcome on this podcast Andrew Ning, the founding leader of Google Brain and former chief scientist at Baidu, who juggles multiple roles as a teacher, entrepreneur, and investor. Ning is also the founder of edtech firm Deep Learning AI. He's the founder and CEO of Landing AI, which is a software provider for industrial automation and manufacturing. He's a general partner at AI Fund, so he'll be speaking about investments. And he's the chairman and co-founder of Coursera, which is a household name today. Of course, besides all these roles, he's also an adjunct professor at Stanford University's Computer Science Department. In today's podcast, we hope that Ning will share his views on the OpenAI fracas, loss to jobs, to generative AI. We all sort of have an idea of what Ning's position, because he's used to sharing his views on X, which was formerly Twitter. But we would still like to hear his views on the debate around artificial general intelligence and global regulation of AI, among other things. So, Andrew, a hearty welcome to the AI Rising podcast. So there are a lot of questions to ask you, but I would start with one basic question, which is on the top of the mind of everybody, and which you have also commented on X, regarding the Open AI stuff. So this the reason is that Open AI has become the poster boy for generative AI, something that you have been talking about uh, for such a long time. Uh, so, what are your quick thoughts on what's happening at OpenAI, and if it will have any impact on the way generative AI is moving, the pace, the acceleration that is there? Will it lose momentum? Will it get, regardless of whether Sam Altman stays at the helm, whether he joins Microsoft or whether he stays back?
I feel like I think this is a very significant bump in the road for OpenAI. And I think that a few paths are possible. So as of a few hours ago, the reports are that I don't have firsthand knowledge of this, right? But the report says a few hours ago that there's still discussions about Sam maybe returning as CEO. Sam was my student at Stanford. He actually interned in my lab. But I like him. I think he's been a great leader. And what happened was pretty tragic. And I feel like a lot of my sympathies also lie with the broader OpenAI team. So many friends there, well-meaning, just working hard to create AI and bring us benefits to everyone. And then suddenly, for no reason that has been made clear, their good work and livelihoods were disrupted. So I feel quite sad at what happened to a lot of my friends at OpenAI.
Could have been avoided, I guess.
I think the governance structure is now very much discredited. I think in the early days, there were all sorts of arguments about why, right, a nonprofit structure is preferable, or even a nonprofit that controls a for-profit. Frankly, a lot of people made a lot of arguments about that. I think those arguments are now very discredited, and certainly going to make investors shy away from the clever arguments for very innovative governance structures. Um, and then I think that OpenAI does have many valuable assets, right? So reportedly more than $1 billion in annualized revenue, lots of customers, a brilliant, phenomenal product. So whatever happens, I think the risk of OpenAI dying a sudden death, I don't think that will happen. But how much the team stays will be crucial to how innovative OpenAI will be in the future. If all the key people go, it'd be difficult for the company to keep on innovating. But then sometimes businesses that don't innovate can still survive for a long time, but that's clearly not the fate that any of us are hoping for such a wonderful organization.
Fair enough. I guess we'll have to wait and watch the space for further developments. But till then, I mean, the impetus that generative AI has got in the world, how should businesses or CXOs treat new Gen AI developments? Should they be early adopters? Should they wait for these technologies to mature? Will it sort of depend on the sector that any company belongs to?
So I think that any company that does a lot of knowledge work should embrace it and do so relatively quickly. And even industries that don't do knowledge work, they seem to be becoming more data oriented, right? Even things like manufacturing and natural resource extraction, which traditionally did not seem like knowledge work, have been becoming more data and AI oriented. Um, and then it turns out that the cost of experimenting and developing with Gen AI is lower than with earlier ways of AI. So in this course that we recently launched on Coursera, Generative AI for Everyone, I feel like a good recipe is to take a look at the jobs being done by people in the company, break the jobs down into tasks, and see what tasks are amenable to AI automation. And given the low development costs, I think it's definitely every large enterprise should look at it. I think that even medium enterprises may well have the resources to develop Gen AI applications. And I think I think very small enterprises, many individuals doing knowledge work would benefit from learning about Gen AI and using it to day-to-day work. And while small businesses may not have the resources to build their custom Gen AI applications, being able to get free or purchase the right Gen AI applications, this is accelerating productivity today. So if I were a CEO of any company from very small to medium to very large, I would definitely be looking carefully at this and thinking through how it affects my business.
Yeah, but being a CXO in today's times and looking at the kind of, the accelerated pace at which generative AI is moving ahead, there's also this whole question about whether generative AI is safe enough for the enterprise. I'm not talking so much about users, but more from a large enterprise. We have had that case of Samsung. You in your course itself, the generative AI course, you mentioned about hallucinations, and we know the amount of limitations that generative AI also has at this point in time. So, given these limitations, what is the best way of approaching a generative AI model in today's times, especially when we are fine tuning it for the enterprise?
I think Gen AI is absolutely safe enough for many applications, not for all applications, but for many. And I think part of the um, job of not just C-suite, but really companies broadly is to go and identify and take advantage of it in those applications. Yeah, why want it to automatically dispense a pill for me to take as a drug when I'm sick? Probably not. But but for a lot of applications, including using it as a thought partner to help with brainstorming or improving your writing or helping summarize information, process information. There are a lot of use cases in corporations where it's absolutely safe enough today and would boost productivity significantly.
Now, touching, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the whole subject about jobs and automation. Now, a lot of jobs are being automated. Uh, I know that I know your position on this subject, but what is a good way of looking at it? Because the World Economic Forum has given a whole list of jobs that will be automated over a period of time, and at the simultaneously it has given a list of the jobs that will not be impacted by generative AI and AI as of now, and it has also simultaneously spoken about the new kind of jobs that are being created. uh, your quick thoughts on how should users actually look at it without being becoming prey to a lot of scaremongering around it.
Oh, so what I'm seeing is that for a lot of jobs, Gen AI can augment or automate just a small fraction of it. Let's say 20% of someone's job could be automated using Gen AI. So that means that it's very beneficial both for the business and to the individual to figure out which 20% can be automated and then use Gen AI to get that productivity boost. I'm not minimizing, the suffering of the much smaller number of people whose jobs will be fully automated. So some jobs will go away. I think we owe it to them to create a safety net for them and take care of them. But in the vast majority of cases, AI today is good enough only to automate part of someone's job. And that often means that the person's job is just fine, except that people in that job profession that use AI, that's what will replace people that don't.
So when you're talking about a safety net, are you referring to the universal concept of the universal basic income?
I think the UBI is one possible solution, but we don't necessarily need that just yet. Uh, because I think that there's still so much work for people to do. So in so many places, there just aren't enough workers. So I think that right now, I feel like it'd be even more promising for governments, public organizations to help people reskill so that they can contribute to society in other ways if their current job is disrupted.
What's the traction that you're seeing in this generative? I mean, I know generative AI course for beginners is just one of it, but you have been Coursera has got a host of other courses. What's the kind of traction that you're seeing, and how are are employees taking these certifications seriously when giving jobs to people?
So I think that Gen AI for Everyone was it is Coursera's fastest growing course of 2023 with, I forget, was it 47,000 enrollments in the first week. So I think that broadly, it probably won't surprise you, there's very high interest in learning Gen AI skills, both for technical skills. So with some other, technical courses, like DeepLearn.ai worked with AWS to create a course on generative AI, more developer oriented. So seeing a lot of traction on the developer oriented content as well as on the content like Gen AI for Everyone that is oriented to everyone, including a non-technical audience. I think, because Gen AI is so disruptive, it is changing the nature of work for a lot of professions. And so understandably, there is just a very high degree of interest in figuring this out. How will this affect my business? How will this affect my job? How can I and my teammates take advantage of this? And, whenever there's a new wave of technology, a lot of media focus tends to be on the technology and on the companies providing the tech. So nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. But for the tech suppliers to be successful, the users of tech have to be even more successful because they need to get even more value to be able to afford to pay the tech suppliers. And so, so I hope that Gen AI for Everyone and other courses on Coursera can help people use the technology, become developers that build on top of the technology and create that layer, which kind of almost by definition has to generate even more value than the tool builders.
But there also seems to be, simultaneously, there seems to be a lot of confusion around, like, for instance, if you take specifically prompt engineering. Now, of course, they're talking about even prompt engineering itself being automated. Or for that matter of fact, we have been speaking for quite some time about machine learning algorithms writing more ML algorithms, or AI writing AI, to be put simply. So, to what, there's a whole confusion around what should I be learning, what will be automated by AI itself. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, and I think it changes, and I think, fear of job loss is a emotionally very deep emotional matter. Uh, I wish AI was even more powerful than it is, but realistically, it can automate, a fraction of tasks done by the economy, but only a fraction. There's still so much that Gen AI cannot do. There was a research paper, GPTs are GPTs, published by OpenAI and some of my friends at University of Pennsylvania, that estimates, I think I've seen different organizations at different estimates on the low end. I think some estimates are that Gen AI can automate maybe 15% of the tasks done in the US economy. The higher end may be approaching 50%, but 15 or 50%, these are huge numbers as a percentage of the economy. So I think we should embrace it and go figure out the use cases. And I think in terms of how to think about one's own career, I hope that Gen AI for Everyone will help with that, because I found that this process. Right now, I really work with businesses, including very large businesses, where we do exactly what I present in the class. We look at the jobs, break the jobs down to tasks, then go through a list, figure out what's automatable. And then that really helps us to identify opportunities to help the business. So that process that people can apply to their own jobs or their own companies, that really helps think these things through.
Now, there also seems to be another debate around LLMs versus the SLMs, or the small language models. Now, I know clearly that what the traditional thinking is basically that the larger the language model, the better, the more it is efficient, or the efficacy is higher. But currently, of late, we have had a lot of smaller language models, anywhere between 7 and 70 billion parameters, and even lower than that, which seem to be far more effective. I just wanted your views on how to, look at this entire subject of LLMs versus SLMs. Are they meant for specific tasks? Is a clear differentiation? I mean, how exactly should people look at it?
So I think that LMs will be, if you look at, think about, I think our use of LMs, similar to our use of CPU of computation, will span different sizes for different applications. So today, we have the very powerful, data center servers and GPUs. We have a CPU running on my laptop, maybe a less powerful one running my phone, and even less powerful one running my watch, and an even less powerful one, controlling some light in my car. So today we have a huge range of compute processes spanning a huge range of different tasks. And look in the future, a really advanced model like GPT-4 or Gemini, when that's released, there will be some very complex tasks for which that would be the best solution. But if your goal is to build an AI to summarize conversations in a contact center, or maybe check grammar, for your writing, which I actually use it for all the time. Maybe I don't need an LM that knows that much about history, philosophy, astronomy. It just you don't need to know that much stuff to check my grammar, and for that, a smaller LM would work just fine. And in fact, the other interesting trend is I routinely run like a 13 billion parameter LM on my laptop. So when I'm on an airplane, if I don't have Wi-Fi and I want to do something, it's definitely not as good as GPT-4, far inferior to GPT-4. But if I'm on an airplane without Wi-Fi, I'll run the 13 billion parameter LM on my laptop, and it helps me get work done. So I think that look in the future, I think that I think there'll be more work as well on edge AI, where more people will run LMs at the edge, because then if you just want to check your grammar and spelling, why do you need to turn all your data over to cloud hosted server when a smaller LM running on your laptop in a much more privacy preserving way will work just fine? So I think, so there'll be different size models for different tasks.
Yeah, and in this context also, I mean, just elaborating a little more, there's a lot of talk about the success of open source foundation models and open source LLMs. Now, will these kind of open source foundation models, frontier models, and LLMs help in the explainability of these models as such? And can they be scaled up? Will they be secure enough for enterprises?
Oh, so one nice thing about some of the open source LLMs is you can run it in your own corporate environment. So then I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but I think LLMs are actually decent at I think LLMs are better than most people think at explanations. Just ask it what it's thinking, right? When you ask it and it gives you an answer, just ask, why did you answer that? And I'm not saying the explanations are perfect, but
No, and Andrew, I was asking more from the point of view of, because most of the foundation models and LLMs would probably also be using a lot of unsupervised algorithms, and the whole debate around it is that these are unexplainable, that algorithms are black boxes. So, will an open source model sort of mitigate that, or comfort people that, okay, here are models where you can probably understand the code better. It's all the transparency is higher, perhaps.
I think the transparency is higher, but even for open source LLM, it's pretty hard to figure out why it gave a certain answer. So I don't know. I think it may help a little bit, but frankly, for a lot of LLMs, if you want an explanation, just ask the LLM to give you an explanation. And I'm not saying that totally facetiously, but I know sometimes the explanations aren't great, but sometimes the explanation could satisfy the user in terms of understanding the reasoning better. Um, yeah, so
Will they sort of help regulators? Now, there's a lot of global regulation. I think in just the last couple of months, you had as it is, we had a lot of AI regulation. And then over that, now we have had recently the new US executive order. We had the G7 order. We had the European Union, the UK regulations in place. And then many other countries will follow suit. So there's a lot of, barrage of regulation at this point in time, which is perhaps a good thing, but there's also this whole question of whether it's going to stifle innovation and the pace of at which AI is moving.
So I think we need good regulations on AI. I think clarity on how should we or should we not take Gen AI to healthcare or underwriting or all of these safety critical or fairness critical areas. So I think we need good regulations. Unfortunately, I'm seeing much more bad regulation around the world than good regulation. I think the U.S. White House executive order was a bad idea. Um, in terms of starting to put burdensome reporting requirements on people training large models. The EU AI Act was thoughtful in some places and flawed in some places. The idea of taking a tiered approach to AI risk, that's a good idea. I think some applications, for example, if an AI application, screening people for jobs, well, that's high risk. So let's make sure to mitigate that risk. But the problem with the EU AI Act proposal was it kind of just defines that large models, prima facie, are risky, and that's a problem because I think then putting burdensome reporting requirements on anyone that trains a large model will stifle innovation because only the large tech companies have the capacity, have much greater capacity for managing compliance. And it turns out that I actually, my understanding, I'm not very familiar with the India approach to regulation, but my sense was that India is taking a very light touch. And I think that's great. I think India is actually taking a good approach. Um, and what's slowly occurring to more and more countries is if something like the White House EO ends up being enforced and even taking a few steps behind that, guess who the winners and losers are? The winners, arguably, I'm not even sure, will be a handful of tech companies that currently are advanced in LLMs, and then almost all nations, without those that in-house expertise right now, will lose out in it being much harder to access open source technology. So I find that most Asian nations, have been regulating this with a much lighter touch, which has been a good move. I think the White House approach is problematic. The EU AI Act is problematic. The CEO of Mistral had a very good perspective on this as well that I think I retweeted. And then it's interesting. Fewer Asian countries have been caught up with the AI extinction hype. That's more of a European thing at this point. US government officials tend to roll their eyes when I bring that up, which is good. That's the right reaction.
No, I'm glad you brought up the whole question of India because, yes, I do agree with you that it has been a lighter touch out there. But having said that, I mean, now I think some kind of stringent regulations or enhancement of regulations would come up in the area, specific in the area of deep fakes. I think because of those incidents that have taken place. I mean, you understand deep algorithms better than most people. I would love your thoughts on this whole thing of deep fakes and regulation.
I think regulating applications is a great idea. I feel like, so deepfakes it is problematic in some places, and certainly one of the most disgusting things has been generation of non-consensual, pornographic images. That's just absolutely disgusting. I'm glad regulators are trying to regulate that horrible application out of existence, I would hope. Um, uh, and then and I think more broadly, once we look at applications like underwriting software, deciding whether or not to make loans, we could sensibly talk about what is fair, what is not fair, what are the outcomes we want, and figure out what are the risks and mitigate risks appropriately. So where regulators have made a mistake has been when regulators were looking to uh, um, regulate the technology, which is really difficult because what are the risks of, AI, right? And so I find that regulations on the technology rather than the application end up just creating friction that slows down the technology development, and this will slow down human progress, and they'll cause it to be maybe. I think that having more intelligence in the world, be it human intelligence or artificial intelligence, is a good thing. Yes, intelligence can be used for nefarious purposes, but over many centuries, one of the reasons humanity has advanced is because we all collectively got smarter and better educated and had more knowledge. So slowing that down seems like a very flawed thing for governments to do.
I mean, especially after generative AI picked up pace, uh, over the last 7, 8 months, we have been like talking a lot about AGI. I mean, you hardly have a discussion, and the debates were getting a little more acerbic over X. I mean, there was a clear divide. I mean, where you see Jeffrey Hinton, you see Yoshio Bengio on one hand, you have Jan LeCun on, and that group of accomplished experts. You have Jan LeCun, you have yourself, and many others who are saying, okay, let's take a sort of a sober view about AGI. It's just not happening at this point in time. This debate, I don't think, is going to end in a hurry. But having said that, uh, what is your? I mean, you have stated your view quite a few times on X, but I would love, your audience would love to hear you once again. So, what is your stand, and what is a good approach to look at AGI?
Let's see. So the most widely accepted definition of AGI is AI that could do any intellectual task that a human can. I think we're at least decades away from that, maybe more. I don't know, maybe 30 to 50 years away from that. It turns out that there's a number of companies. It turns out there are some people that are optimistic about getting to AGI in 3 years or 5 years. But if you look carefully, many of them change the definition of AGI.
Yes.
So I showed to one of my economist friends one of these companies' definitions, and my friend, who's a well-known economist, said, "Well, if that's the definition, I think we got to AGI 30 years ago." So it is true we can get there very quickly by lowering the bar. But for the original definition of AGI, I think we're quite far away.
Yeah, I mean, recently I think Google also changed its definition. So did I think OECD gave a new definition of AGI.
Yeah, the problem with redefining terms is people already have a ascribe a meaning to them. And maybe I'll give one example. People have been debating, is a machine sentient or is a machine self-aware? It's a philosophical question, and I don't know the answer to it because it's a philosophical rather than scientific question. But imagine if we were to set a very low bar, some very simple test to declare a machine sentient. This will lead to very sensationalist news articles saying machines are sentient because it met some strange technical bar that doesn't capture the full meaning of what words like that mean to most of the human race. So I'm actually not sure that, coming up with a very narrow technical definition is a good thing, because I think this will lead to sensationalist hype shortly when someone meets this narrow technical definition.
Yeah, true. But in the past, we used to see a lot of sensationalism in the media about around AGI. But of late, I've been seeing that the experts are, talking more about AGI than the media, and media is simply mouthing it. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's a different
Oh,
perspective.
yeah, that's
Now,
interesting.
yeah, I mean, it's hardly the media saying anything nowadays. It's more the experts debating with each other over what is the level of AGI.
But it turns out when you change the definition, when you're allowed to change the definition, it's much easier. So
Exactly. So now you are the founder of deeplearning.ai, you're the founder and CEO of Landing AI, you're the general partner at AI Fund, you're the chairman and co-founder of Coursera, and you're also an adjunct professor at Stanford University, which I guess you're still with me. So you are like sort of, uh, I'd love to understand from an investor point of view, given that you're the general partner at AI Fund, the typical criticism about most of the companies with AI and generative AI were that they were just creating wrappers around foundation models or generative or LLMs. Are you seeing real good companies coming out, deep tech companies coming out of Silicon Valley and the world, for that matter of fact, India, other countries, China?
I think absolutely. I'm seeing great businesses built. While it is true that there have been some companies that are a thin wrapper on on some API, I think that there's actually a lot of opportunities to build really deep tech on top of new Gen AI capabilities. So, I think does Mint Media, are you built on top of AWS? Oh, maybe to take a different analogy. I don't think that Uber is a thin wrapper on top of iOS. It is built on top of iOS, but you can do a lot of work on top of new developer platforms. So, AI Fund was seeing very deep, very hard to replicate tech stacks increasingly being built. It's just that it happens to use Gen AI technology.
So, as an investor, what would you look out for in today's entrepreneurs? What would be your advice to budding entrepreneurs who are trying to get into this field?
It depends on the type of business you're trying to build, but AI Fund focuses on venture scale businesses. So we tend to go after businesses with a significant market need, and then we can build technology to address. And we actually like building things with that involve deep tech that are not that easy to replicate. But I would say, if you're not AI Fund, if you're an entrepreneur, to most entrepreneurs, I would say just go and build an experiment. And frankly, if you build a thin wrapper and it works, great. Use those learnings to maybe make that wrapper deeper or go do something else that's even harder to build. I think this is such a time of expansion and creativity and innovation. I would say to most innovators, just be responsible, but with that caveat, just go and try things out quickly, because there's so many opportunities to build things that just were not possible before. The new tools means there's so many things possible that just no one on the planet could have built, 6 months ago, because the tools just weren't available. So jump in and try stuff out.
Before we close, anything that you would like to highlight that I would have probably missed out in this conversation?
I feel like AI is a very transformative technology that benefits every individual and every business. So that's why I was excited to teach Gen AI for everyone, because we have to help every individual and every business navigate this. So I hope that people will jump on, learn about the technology, and use it to benefit themselves and the communities around them and the world at large.
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it, given your hectic schedule. And I hope I get to see you when you visit India. Hope it's
Yes,
sometime soon.
I haven't been since the pandemic, so
Yeah, you haven't. You haven't. I know because I last met you. You used to be a regular in India, but you haven't been coming to India for the. So
figure
thank
that
you
out.
again very much for your time, and
It's
hope
great
to
to
see you soon.
thank you, Leslie, and thanks for
Thanks.